Welcome back to our channel where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. We are excited to share the following news. Buckingham confirms no way back for Prince Andrew. After finding secret files behind his bedroom, Buckingham Palace said in an official statement that King Charles III has started a formal assessment of Prince Andrew's styles, titles, and honors. This is because documents were uncovered during normal maintenance at a property related to the Duke of York. What started as an examination of private apartments apparently turned into a serious issue for the royal family, leading to emergency meetings, cross-border legal coordination, and a set of institutional measures. A secret climate-controlled room behind a bedroom wall in a Swiss home has been found, and the material within it is now the focus of an investigation that spans many countries. The palace has not listed the items, but people who know about the situation say that the materials made senior officials act right away and seriously, and they also led the king to look into the Duke's status. The process is intended to decide what Prince Andrew's long-term role in public life will be and how he will relate to the monarchy. The find in the Swiss Alps. In February 2023, the resort community of Verbier, which is a winter getaway for rich families and international bankers, was silent for the season. A home connected to the Duke of York lay amid chalets. It was a 6-story building worth around $13 million that had been mostly empty for nearly 18 months. Marie-Claire Dubois, a local property manager, was hired to do a condition report as part of regular maintenance. As she walked through the rooms, she saw the usual indicators of vacancy: frigid air, covered furniture, and inactive fixtures. The rooms were filled with Persian carpets, chandeliers, and costly pieces of art. She found a door at the end of a third-floor hallway that was not included on the maintenance and insurance plans. The blueprints that were filed with the local government did not take into account the space behind it. The door itself was simple, but it had a lock that was more secure than those on other rooms. This is something that is generally only seen on safes or archive areas. Dubois did what he was supposed to do and got in touch with the Duke's lawyers in London. She was advised that the door should not be opened and that the room housed personal belongings such as family heirlooms and letters. Officials were hesitant because of the combination of high security and not being included in official plans. Within 3 days, Swiss police lawyers and a locksmith who specializes in this kind of thing had been to the property. The lock opened to show a room with no windows and temperature control that was around 20 square meters in size. There were 7 tall steel file cabinets in the area, and everything was very well organized. There was a fragrance of old paper and leather in the air. The contents, which were the subject of official seizures, forensic cataloging, and diplomatic exchange, quickly became the focus of an international investigation that had consequences for the monarchy. The discovery behind a bedroom wall in a small alpine community had revealed an archive whose presence put the royal family's traditions of secrecy and control to the test. A collection of disagreements. The things in the concealed chamber were more numerous and more organized than the first people to see them had thought. The 7 cabinets had an archive that covered more than 30 years and was organized in a way that made it seem like someone had put in a lot of time and effort. What may have been seen as a private treasure turned out to be a complicated legal and institutional issue. Swiss investigators collected a lot of financial data, including boring account summaries and investment records, as well as long chains of transactions that went via offshore countries that are notorious for keeping things secret. The paper trail showed a network of accounts and businesses in different areas. Financial investigators know that these kinds of setups are common in attempts to hide where money comes from and where it goes. The sheer number and lack of clarity in these records made people wonder right once what they were for, where they came from, and whether they were wrong. There was also a huge file of correspondence next to the financial papers. It had letters, printed emails, and memos that were organized by date and had notes on them. Names came from the fields of business banking and international politics, including those who had already been in the news or the courts. Investigators said that many of these persons were not just casual acquaintances, but people who had been involved in important business deals and partnerships for a long time. There were dates, places, and handwritten comments in each folder, although it was not always apparent who wrote the notes. There were also a lot of photos and tagged albums in the archive. Some of the pictures were just group photographs from events or private parties, while others were framed in a manner that made them seem like they may be compromising. Albums looked more like reference books than sentimental keepsakes. Most importantly, a large part of the material was about Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender and financier. Sources claim these papers were more thorough than anything previously revealed. They reportedly included private flight logs that seemed to contradict official statements about the Duke's travel records of financial transactions that went through middleman accounts, and messages that suggested a closer and more coordinated relationship than what was known to the public. When looked at as a whole, this evidence called into question Prince Andrew's long-standing defense that his relationship with Epstein was a bad friendship that did not last long. Instead, it pointed to a long-term and complex relationship. There were other things to worry about than materials relating to Epstein. Other cabinets had papers from Prince Andrew's time as Britain's special representative for trade and investment from 2001 to 2011. These data showed how people interacted with foreign authorities, business leaders, and financiers, including oligarchs and people from countries with bad human rights records. Documents included conversations about possible agreements, favors traded, and transactions that made it hard to tell the difference between official diplomatic obligations and personal business interests. The archive revealed that royal privilege may have been utilized as a cover for actions that would have been more closely watched if they had been done by private persons or official government representatives. Swiss officials carefully wrote down what was in the room and how it was kept safe, including temperature control, a high-security lock, and meticulous labeling. This shows that they wanted to secure and keep the material for a long time. It resembled an insurance policy, a reservoir of information meant to defend its owner. When Swiss authorities told the British Embassy in Bern about the situation, it went from a private legal issue to one that had diplomatic and national implications. The hidden archive behind the bedroom wall was on its way to Buckingham Palace and British officials. The palace faces a crisis. The British Embassy sent the first Swiss results to Buckingham Palace via encrypted channels. The initial report reached the King's private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, who briefed King Charles III. For Charles, less than a year into his reign after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the findings presented a particularly delicate problem, a crisis that combined private misconduct with institutional risk. People at the palace have long thought that Prince Andrew was a threat to their reputation. But the Verbier finding breached a new boundary. This was not just a rumor or a single bad picture. It was a well-organized, tangible collection of preserved recordings that were kept in the Duke's private room. A crisis meeting conducted in a secret office at Buckingham Palace. The king, his private secretary, the master of the household, and top legal experts who specialize in constitutional issues and crisis management were all there. Sir Edward Llewellyn, a veteran diplomat who has dealt with delicate international situations, attended the talks via a secure video connection. People said the mood was strained and urgent. Charles was told about the Swiss inventory, which included complicated offshore financial records, letters with controversial international figures, and material that suggested the archive had been put together as insurance. The implication that Prince Andrew might have been keeping leverage that could embarrass or implicate others hit at the heart of monarchical trust. For the king, the finding indicated a personal betrayal and an institutional threat. The legal review was quite clear. If the chamber's contents were made public, it may lead to criminal investigations in many places, putting both the Duke and the royal household under a lot of scrutiny. The files made some wonder whether the institution had allowed or ignored actions that should have led to earlier action. People would be quite critical of past failures to respond quickly. There was danger in every choice. It was politically impossible to claim diplomatic immunity for the Duke, and it may have constitutional ramifications. It was morally imperative for the royals to fully and immediately cooperate with investigators, yet doing so may have revealed decades of private activities that had nothing to do with the Duke. People could see negotiating deletions or restricting information as a cover-up, which would make trust even weaker. After thinking about it, King Charles made a clear choice. He said that there would be no cover-up by the institution and that the palace will collaborate with the authorities to make sure that the papers were handled properly with national security in mind. The official stance stressed formal collaboration. Charles also made a big personal choice. Prince Andrew would never be seen in public again. There would be no planned return to royal responsibilities or any endeavor to do better as a working royal. The king thought that the finding had cut off any possible way back into public office. That position did not fix all the problems inside the group. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, spoke up for complete transparency, saying that the monarchy needed to be accountable even if it cost a lot of money. There were still closed-door arguments, but the Swiss archive threw a lengthy shadow over Charles's early rule and hurt his image in a big way. The Duke was trapped. Prince Andrew stayed at Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park as the palace put its crisis plan into action. When he heard about the Swiss find and the palace's response, his friends said he was both defiant and scared. He allegedly said that the papers were just normal records that had been misconstrued or taken out of context. He was upset that investigators were making a scary story out of normal paperwork. The archive's careful organization, filing things in order, labeling them correctly, and hiding them, made claims of accidental accumulation less believable. The files showed that there was a planned long-term effort to save and secure information. Charles and Andrew spoke to each other alone without any personnel. People who were watching said that the brothers' relationship had become a lot worse. Charles had defended his younger brother from time to time throughout the years, but the secret archive seemed to be the last straw. The official statement from Buckingham Palace was careful and polite. It said that items had been identified during a property check and were being looked at by the right people. It also highlighted the Duke's cooperation and the royal family's promise to be open. There were no professions of personal support for the Duke, or efforts to diminish how terrible the situation was. The palace started a full assessment in private. We hired forensic accountants to follow the money trails that were found in the files. Intelligence agencies were quietly asked whether any of the data constituted a threat to national security. A legal team started talking to Swiss officials about how to share evidence and how to find papers that could be protected by legal privilege or state protection claims. As controlled leaks and court filings came out, they painted a picture of Prince Andrew that was quite different from the image he had worked hard to create of himself as a straight-laced naval commander who sometimes made mistakes. The papers showed that he was more calculated and had a lot of foreign connections. He also exploited his royal position in ways that made it hard to tell what was private and what was public. The financial records were exceptionally bad. They allegedly spoke of a web of offshore accounts and trusts, with locations ranging from the British Virgin Islands to Panama that supported transactions worth around $12 million between 1995 and 2018. It was not clear right away where a lot of this money came from. Some of the money seemed to be tied to his job as a trade envoy, which had previously come under fire for ties to people like Timur Kulibayev, a Kazakh businessman with ties to the family of Kazakhstan's former ruler. Documents that were supposedly given to the police gave additional information regarding these kinds of links. For example, there were letters related to the selling of Andrew's previous marital house, Sunning Hill Park, to a company affiliated to Kulibayev for a sum that was more than the market value. The archive revealed that these contacts were part of a larger pattern of mutual access and influence. Other parts provide further information about his connection with Epstein. Even while public comments said there was little interaction, papers reportedly showed trips on Epstein's private plane visits to places connected to Epstein's operations and correspondence that showed a level of familiarity that did not match prior declarations. The amount of stuff that was secretly kept at the villa made the Duke's public defenses less strong. A former senior working royal now had to deal with secrets he had kept. Using secrets as a weapon. The most illuminating information may have been a series of personal notes, both typed and handwritten, that seemed more like a private ledger of complaints, observations, and plans than a journal. These diaries gave us a glimpse into the mind of a guy who thought in practical, sometimes vengeful terms, and who felt like he was under assault. Over time, the tone of the notes changed. The first posts from the 1990s and 2000s showed how unhappy the writer was with public life and how they felt underappreciated. The writings became colder and more angry by the 2010s, blaming the media palace advisors and elder family members for not standing up for him. He said that others were jealous of his international connections and power and that they had hurt him. Some notes were important because they revealed that the writer knew he was weak and had a plan to deal with it. He expected to be looked at closely, so he gathered and organized facts. One handwritten note from 2019, shortly after the Epstein controversy came back to light, was quite clear. The Duke wrote down what he had done to protect himself and warned that if the institution tried to get rid of him, he had ways to get back at them. It was clear what they meant. The archive was used as leverage. It was insurance to remind the institution that his destiny was tied to the reputations of others, and that a complete unraveling may cause further humiliation. That changed the collection from just a historical record to a possible weapon. Intelligence and security agencies were worried. Agencies who looked over the files found a lot of interactions with people who worked for foreign governments and intelligence agencies. They could not find any concrete proof that the Duke had betrayed the state or spied on it, but the way he interacted with people and his evident readiness to use his authority for profit made him vulnerable. A monarch who used their power for their own benefit may be taken advantage of by people from other countries. The papers show that the carelessness turned the issue from a scandal into a matter of national security. When these kinds of reports got to high-ranking government and royal officials, they felt less sorry for the Duke. His reputation was already hurt by his prior settlement with Virginia Giuffre. The Swiss archive, which had organized papers and hidden documents, ruined what was left. The image that came out was of a guy who had lived a double life in the gray zones of power. He was not only irresponsible, but also careful protecting himself with a store of materials meant to keep him in control. The secrets behind his bedroom wall were not only proof of decisions he had made in the past, but also tools that had gone wrong. The walls that were quiet fell down. It was hard to keep the secrets from the underground room under wraps. What started as a private Swiss investigation quickly turned into a public scandal in the UK, revealing not just one man's behavior, but also weaknesses in an organization that had long kept its members safe by keeping quiet. The government moved quickly. Committees called emergency meetings to look at how royal funds are managed and any possible conflicts of interest amongst family members. Questions that were formerly off-limits become part of the public conversation. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace to demand answers. Polls revealed that people were losing faith in the monarchy, especially younger people, and opinion articles in the media urged for change. The issue was important for more than just Prince Andrew's personal problems. The files showed that there was a structure of privilege where people were afraid to speak out about bad behavior. This royal crisis was different from past ones that were about personal issues like marriage or abdication. It was about governance integrity and the danger that an unregulated culture may hurt state institutions. Inside the palace, the argument changed from limiting damage to making fundamental changes. Senior courtiers and advisors spoke about independent transparency audits, stiffer limits on how royals do business outside of the royal family, and cutting down on the number of family members who labor to protect the institution. The traditional way of dealing with scandals, which was to keep them quiet until they went away, seemed less and less possible. King Charles, who was aware of how the populace felt, decided that protecting his brother any further would put the monarchy in danger. He recognized a painful truth: the monarchy may need to make sacrifices and have clear lines of responsibility in order to stay alive. After that, public declarations were made admitting mistakes and pledging to make things better. Even if they were carefully phrased, the message was clear: the time of automatic respect and private fixing was over. Prince Andrew was no longer allowed to do any official activities, and his honors were put under formal review. Following then, a new kind of monarchy came into being. After the impact of the catastrophe, everything returned to its regular state in the months that quickly followed. Andrew's public position was terminated via an internal process that had previously started in response to previous controversies. This procedure was carried out and completed effectively. The Crown was able to regain all of its military responsibilities as well as royal patronages. As a result of the closure of his official office at Buckingham Palace, long-term workers were either transferred to other positions or terminated from their positions. Even while he continued to have the title of Duke of York, it was primarily a title that did not come with any formal responsibilities. The papers from the bedroom resulted in a significant amount of legal activity across international boundaries. During the search for offshore networks and shell companies, the Swiss and British financial crime departments collaborated one another. Investigations were characterized by diplomatic maneuverings that were careful and legal talks. It was a gradual process, but the strategies that were employed to conceal ownership and the movement of funds had already caused damage to the company's reputation. Because of the tragedy, the monarchy decided to implement measures that had been discussed for a number of years on end. Renewal through transparency was the topic of Charles III's major speech, which he delivered publicly. A great number of individuals believed that this was a reference to the crisis. Having independent audits of royal finances, stronger limits on family members' financial interactions with persons outside the family, and a clearer separation of private interests from public commitments are some of the things that he described as being necessary in order to bring the institution up to date. The purpose of these measures was to restore the Crown's prestige and ensure that it continues to fulfill its constitutional duty. People placed a greater emphasis on the financial situation of the Crown. It was the responsibility of parliamentary committees to investigate the distribution of the sovereign grant, as well as the administration of Crown properties. Within the context of the contemporary democratic society, the narrative raised more significant questions of privilege duty and the function of a hereditary monarchy. There has been an increase in republicanism and politically organized organizations in many Commonwealth nations, and they are citing the dispute as evidence that the Constitution should have some revisions. It was quite necessary for Prince Andrew to be by himself at Royal Lodge. In spite of the fact that he did not appear in public very often, the people and the media made fun of him whenever he did. His daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, remained in the family, but kept a professional distance from him in order to protect their individual careers and charitable organizations. As part of the bigger investigation into the Epstein scandal, law enforcement officials from the United States and other countries attempted to get written communications and travel records that were referenced in the Swiss documents. Over the course of time, the public's initial outrage gradually gave way to a more serious acceptance of change. The monarchy is still in existence, but it has evolved. It is impossible to get Prince Andrew's reputation back to its previous state. The crisis provided us with a severe lesson about how terrible it is when the lines between personal gain and public obligation are not clearly defined. It was necessary for King Charles to make a decision between his loyalty to his family and his obligation to the institution's organization. The bedroom in the Swiss chalet, which had been a private area in the past, had turned into a physical representation of failure. In addition to sending a clear message, its disguised compartments and kept documents had shown systemic vulnerability. With the scrutiny and accountability that exists in the modern world, there is no title regardless of how ancient it is, and no wall regardless of how big it is, that can ever insulate an institution from the duty to tell the truth. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and say goodbye for now.